So we're going to be going back over our Pro Clubs builds and giving you more up-to-date builds, as a lot of things have changed since the launch of this game, and obviously the builds are going to change along with it. So this video we're going to be covering the center mid or box to box center mid build for FIFA 23 Pro Clubs, and this is the perfect build. Now, starting off with the player profile. Now, when it comes to position, if you want a bit more defending in your player position, then I do recommend the center mid positioning here. Now, what you'll notice is that the defending attributes go up and also the passing attributes go up. Now, if you are a bit more attacking minded, then you want to select the right mid, and this is going to give you a bit more dribbling and a bit more shooting, and passing is going to go down here. You will get a bit more pace out of this one. Now, when it comes to height, I do think 5'4" is absolutely perfect for a box-to-box build. You do need to be able to have the pace. You also need to be able to dribble and pass and do a lot of things. So I do think 5'4" is perfect, but anything from 5'4" up to 5'7" is ideal. So if you are trying to build a bit more of a defensive player, 5'7" or up to 5'7" would be the ideal, but I wouldn't really go anything higher than that. Then when it comes to weight, from 99 pounds all the way up to 119 is the max I would recommend. 119 still allows you to maneuver very, very quickly in that midfield, which is one of the more important things, especially when you're trying to put passes in or keep a hold of the ball, which is very hard to do for the most part in this game. And you've probably noticed a lot of players making a lot more smaller builds recently, and this is kind of the reason why. Preferred foot, you need to make sure you're using your outside foot. So if you're a right mid or you're playing on the right hand side, then I recommend using your right foot. If you're on the left hand side, use your left foot. That's going to mean that you can cross the ball a lot better, of course, because you're using your dominant foot. But then on top of that, if you are going to use something like distance shooter, for example, which we'll get onto in a moment, you are able to outside foot shot, which is way more powerful in this game than finesse shotting. So like I said, just use your outside foot, it just makes more sense. When it comes to perks in this game, you want to make sure that you are using skill dribbler, pinpoint cross, threaded pass. The other two that are really good are distance shooter and interceptor. Those are kind of the main ones I would recommend for kind of any build, and that's just because they are the best. But those are the ones I would mainly focus on when it comes to midfield builds. Now, threaded pass is absolutely amazing in this game, especially if you're trying to do over the top long balls. You absolutely need this. When it comes to pinpoint cross, again, you can use this. If you want to swap it out for something else like distance shooter, you could do that as well. Crossing in this game is relatively decent for the most part if you have good attributes. And then skill dribbler, I feel like I need this on every single build, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know why, but your dribbling feels like 10 times smoother when you have this stacked on top of the attributes. So like I said, that is the way I would run the perks here. When it comes to the actual attributes tree, very important stats here I'll point out first of all, and then we'll get on to the rest of the stuff. So first of all, reactions, super important. I didn't really realize how important this was until I come up against a lot of players that are making small builds, aren't able to kind of maneuver super easily. But then on top of that, if the ball kind of like gets lost and then they kind of gravitate more towards the ball very easily, and it feels like the ball just kind of sticks to them for some reason, is because reaction time is super important. Now, obviously to get the reaction time, you want to make sure you double click and get the barred icon here. And then we have put a little bit on aggression. And then you want to move on to the right hand side and basically max out reactions here. Now, anything plus 90 is good enough, so you don't need to max out completely, but I would like to max out as far as I can. Moving on into the defending part of the skill tree. Now, depending on what you prefer, you can actually not use this archetype and maybe use the skill points elsewhere. So if you do want a bit more defending, because your guy is a bit small, I do think you should use the Guardian archetype on there. It's just going to help overall with winning the ball back. We're not really using any perks that help you win the ball back, so that is why we are maxing out on the attributes tree. But if you are using interceptor, you can obviously remove this and put this elsewhere. You could play around with that a bit, and if you're trying not to play too defensively, then again you can remove this as well. But I think for an overall well-rounded build, you do need this on here. and this is the way I would do it personally. A little bit on standing tackle, of course, a little bit on intercepting, which I think is the most important, and then also get the archetype. When it comes to the dribbling part of the tree, this is actually really important as well, but it's not the most important, so you don't need to max it out completely. You can actually just do the top half of this left-hand side section, which is going to give you all the dribbling attributes, and it'll probably give you like 88 dribbling, which is pretty much good enough in this game. But if you do want the extra skill moves, then you can take it down to the actual archetype itself. But if you remove this and essentially just do this right here, that is good enough. You get an extra 5 skill points to use elsewhere. So that is going to come up to personal preference really on whether you want the archetype on there or not. And if you want to use a skill point somewhere else. But you do want to make sure the agility is there. That's probably the most important thing. And then obviously, like I said, you've got 2 options. On the right hand side, you want to make sure you do have the balance. It's another really important stat that people look over in this game. And that just makes sure that you don't stumble over the ball when you are trying to do skill moves and things like that. So I would max out the Lynx archetype on this side here. Passing, again, if you do have an extra couple of skill points, you can max out your crossing or whatever. But I don't really think you need to like super max out passing in this game, because it is actually pretty decent if you do have enough skill points on here. So crossing with this, and if you have the crossing perk, is good enough. And then also you want to make sure your long passing is pretty decent, and then also the short passing is going to be really good to kind of start with anyway for the most part. So vision is another really good thing to make sure your shots or your passes are actually going where you want them to go, and that is kind of the most important stat when it comes to the actual accuracy of your pass. When it comes to shooting, not super important in my opinion for the way I like to play, because I tend to kind of sit back a lot. But if you are trying to attack, shot power, super important in this game. You want to make sure you at least get that kind of center line on the left hand side here to get at least 80 shot power. Otherwise you're not going to be scoring any goals whatsoever without that. Then you do want to have distance shooter on here, or long shots even. If you're not using the perk, then obviously you do want to have this on here so you can land some of those shots outside the box. It's not going to be super easy like if you had the perk on, for example, but it's still pretty decent. You can probably get a couple of goals here and there. And then also finishing, when you are in the box, you want to be able to finish, so make sure you have that leveled up. And obviously heading and stuff is not going to be super important for a midfielder in my opinion. When it comes to pace, if you do have the extra skill points, or you want to take some off defending, for example, you can max out to the cheetah archetype. Personally, I wouldn't really recommend that, and the reason why is because 88 pace is good enough in this game, and that's what you'd get with this particular skill tree setup that I have just now. But also on top of that, it actually burns through your stamina super quick if you have faster pace. So that is just some other thing you want to keep in mind. And then obviously if you are a box-to-box midfielder, then to be honest, you do need to have as much stamina possible and kind of conserve it as much as possible. So this build does last until the end of the game. You'll still have quite a bit of stamina left if you are able to conserve it properly. Only sprint when you need to. You use left stick dribbling, all that good stuff. 87 stamina is good enough. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, as we will be covering all the other positions on the pitch as well. And thank you very much for watching.